Hey, shout out to my YouTube family. Appreciate you coming out to Khaliis Take. You know what to do. Please like, subscribe. Also hit the notification bell just so you get the newest and the bonus content first. Let's just go ahead and jump right into what the topic is today. So I want to talk about two things the Clippers must avoid in order to make the playoffs or to be looked at as a playoff team or a contender. So, even with Kawhi and PG, we've seen flaws with the Clippers. We've seen a lot of flaws with the Clippers. And of course, those two type players, because they're both superstar players, they make up for a lot of what, the Clippers have in regards to mishaps. And that's what superstars do. They make up for a lot of things that the role players and other players can't do on offense and defense. But the one thing I can always say, this team has always had the next man up mentality. As I said in my last video, previous videos before, they stay with that mentality. And I think that's what keeps them afloat all the time, because even if Kawhi and PG is on the floor and they're not playing that well that night, I've seen several games where other Clippers off the bench come in and give the team a spark, an energy, a force that they didn't have at that moment if Kawhi and PG is not shooting well in the game. And it's not too many games that Kawhi doesn't shoot well. Kawhi is always pretty much efficient. That's why he's the best player on the team. That's why he's a top player in the NBA, because you can usually always count on him being there. Now, Paul George definitely had some inconsistencies throughout his career, still has them at times, but nobody's perfect. So, he does play good at times as well. So you got to it kind of balances out with Paul George somewhat. But of course, you'd rather Paul George to be more consistent and efficient on the offensive end rather than a lot of nights that he's not and Kawhi has to carry a lot of the load. That's definitely not what you want. You definitely want more balance there. And that can definitely, be fixed, or I feel like it could be fixed anyway. I feel like that's something that Paul George can definitely, do a better job at. But will he do it or not? That's the question. We'll just have to see. But does he have the talent to do it? Of course he does. But that's another story for another day. Right now, the Clippers don't have Kawhi and PG. And, I talked about two things they need to avoid. One thing they need to avoid, to me, is definitely inconsistency. And I say that word with conviction, because I know I've said that word many times before when it comes to the Clippers, but I say it with even more conviction now than what I've ever done before, because when you look at the team the way they are now, you don't have Kawhi and PG. You have a bunch of role players, a lot of young role players at that. You have some veterans on the floor, but the inconsistency of what I mean is on both ends when it comes to the veterans and the young players. The young players, and I know it's really hard to ask them to do this, but they have to. The young players have to be more consistent in their gameplay. They have to be more consistent in learning the process, understanding the process, and letting it ride, letting it play out while it's on the floor. Don't get too stagnant with one thing. Don't get too stagnant with the threes. Mix it up a little bit, understand the process of being aggressive. And I feel like Ty Lue implements that to these young guys, but there are times where they just fall in the trap of what the older guys do. And this is where I feel like, the inconsistency plays on both ends. You have guys like Marcus Morris out there who's very inconsistent. He'll go out there and he will drop 19, 20 points one game. And then 2 or 3 games in a row, he'll drop maybe 9 points, 8 points. And then, it's like a never ending circle with a player like that. And then every now and then you'll have a player like Nicholas Batum, who might not, drop that many points, but Nicholas Batum gets a pass to me because, like I said, he's just one of those guys where he can guard position 1 through 5, and he's definitely, a formidable piece. So I don't really, I just say that he struggles every now and then. Like if you look at the game against the Knicks, he only had like 6 points. But I mean, that's okay. Nicholas Batum, he gets a pass with me because I've seen this guy ball out many times, knock down big shots. And the fact that he definitely is more consistent at least on the defensive end and knocking down those shots from the corner and the wings, then Marcus Morris, he gets a pass. But mainly my thing is, when you have veteran guys on the team, they have to be more accountable. They have to show up more times than not. And they have to be more consistent on both ends of the floor, just because Kawhi and PG isn't there, and because they're trying to lead by example and show the younger guys what it takes to be a professional player in the league and how you have to go about handling your business every night and doing it consistent. No matter what type of injury you have or what you're going through off the court, you have a job to do and you have to play it at a high level. And that's where I think the Clippers, fall a lot of times. The inconsistency that they have. Some nights they look really good. Some nights they look offensively stagnant. They just don't look like they're supposed to. And like I said, it's a learning process for the young guys. But at this point, they have to learn quick. They can't learn like most young guys in the NBA take 2 or 3 years to figure out the system and the process. No, they have to learn now, because the Clippers are in win now mode. They're not in rebuild mode. They're not in the mode of, we'll figure this out in a couple seasons. We got a couple years down the road to build this thing up. No, they're in win now mode. So everybody has to understand their role, and they have to understand it pretty damn quickly if they really want to be a formidable playoff team going into this playoffs to put themselves in position to win a championship. Even though you have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George coming back at some point, they can't do it by themselves. They need a team to win. It takes a team to win a championship, not really just one player. I mean, one player can carry a lot, but he can't carry you forever. And at some point, other teammates have to step up and make big shots. I mean, even when you saw Kawhi Leonard in Toronto, it looked like he carried that team the whole playoffs, and he did predominantly. But there were a lot of games where Kyle Lowry stepped up, Fred VanVleet stepped up, Pascal Siakam stepped up. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter how great a player is or how players are. You still need those role players to play their role at a high level in order for you to win a championship. That's just the way it is. So in this situation with the Clippers, that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to stop being inconsistent. You can't get 4 points or 9 points out of Marcus Morris in a game against the Knicks, that a team they should beat and a team he should play well against, because nobody on there can really guard him. That's no way possible. And he's played 20, 25 minutes. You can't do that. You can't get minimal points out of your core players when you're trying to win games, knowing that your 2 stars are down and you need to be as efficient as possible. And the younger guys are looking up to the older guys and be like, hey, we don't got it tonight, or, we can't figure this out. Can y'all take over for us? That's when the older guys have to step in and show their veteran leadership and go out there and execute plays at a high level to not only show the young guys how to play and to execute plays at a high level, but to keep the team afloat as well and keep the team together until everybody gets back 100% fully healthy. That's just the way it is. And that's what you're going to have. You can't have Serge Ibaka playing double-digit minutes, 20-plus minutes or something like that, and Serge Ibaka only has, let's say hypothetically, he only has like 6 to 8 points. That's not good enough, because like I said, you're going to be an up and down Jekyll and Hyde team like that. Now, the Clippers go from a couple of nights ago beating a team like the 76ers with Joel Embiid having a 40-point double-double. I mean, having a monster game. You beat a team like the 76ers, but then you come and lay an egg against a team like the New York Knicks. It just doesn't really make sense to me. And this is what I'm saying. The inconsistency, it just goes both ways. It goes from the veteran guys to the younger guys. Everybody has to be consistent. You can't sit there and play one way one night and then another night get something different from, that game to this game or this game to that game. It doesn't work that way. You're not going to win that way. You're putting yourself in a bad situation. And I feel like that's what the Clippers are doing. And I'm not saying they're doing it intentionally, because like I said, they are shorthanded. So you got to give them a little credit there. They're fighting as much as they can, but you can't have wins against teams like the 76ers, the Nets, and teams like that and beat them with their star players on the floor and then come back the night after or the night after that and lay an egg against a team that shouldn't even, a team that you should beat, a team that you definitely have talent enough to beat. If you're talented enough to beat the Brooklyn Nets at the beginning of this new year, 2022, early this new year, if you're talented enough to beat a team like that, you are definitely talented enough to beat a team like the Knicks. You are definitely talented enough to beat a team like that. Now I think they got the Charlotte Hornets coming up next, or Orlando, somebody like that. But still, they can't fall to teams that they should beat and beat teams that they shouldn't beat in most people's eyes. It just shouldn't go that way. That tells me that there's a lot of inconsistency, and that tells me that the message is not getting through to everybody the way it should. And that tells me that, of course, they're not 100% healthy as a team, but in this situation, you're hovering around that 8th, 9th seed. You've got to find a way to get wins, and get wins against teams you're supposed to beat. You started off good on the road trip, beating a team like the Sixers, but then now you lose to a team like the Knicks. So now it's in question whether you'll beat a team like Charlotte, you'll beat a team like Orlando, you'll beat a team like the Pacers again, because it's just too much up and down basketball. And the problem I have with the Clippers is it's that way. It was that way with Paul George in the early part of the season. It was that way with him. Matter of fact, it was that way some last year, even with Kawhi and PG on the floor. So it's like they need to clear that inconsistency thing up, because like I said, the inconsistency issue that they have, it can't be overridden by the next man mentality all the time, because the next man mentality is not always going to work for you when you're being inconsistent. At some point, the next man up mentality thing is going to die, because inconsistency kills everything over time. It's almost like, pouring acid on something. Acid kills. So it's like inconsistency is basically acid, and it's killing every vibe that the Clippers have to put themselves in better position. Because honestly, beating a team like the 76ers a couple nights ago and losing to a team like the Knicks like yesterday, to me, that type of inconsistency only gets you beat in the playoffs, or it only puts you in position where you don't even make the playoffs, and you have to try to jump into the play-in tournament and try to make your way from there. And that's not what the Clippers want to do. They're good enough to win some games, at least until maybe possibly Paul George comes back, hopefully barring any other bad news or updated bad news about his injury. But still, and maybe till Kawhi Leonard comes back as well, they have a good enough team to stay afloat. They really do. It's just that the inconsistency in how they play and isolation basketball sometimes, and some of the things they do, it just hurts them in the long run. And I really wish that they would, figure out a way to, get that on track. But like I said, it's a work in progress, I suppose. And hopefully that the work in progress becomes reality, and they find a way to fix that, because that's something that can get you beat every time. I mean, look at what the Lakers are going through. Inconsistency is getting them killed every single game. They can come out certain quarters and play well, certain quarters they don't. That's why the ending result, most times, whether they up 10, 15, 20 points, they lose those leads because of inconsistency on both ends of the floor. And that's exactly what the Clippers are falling into, or what the Clippers have been doing for a while, which has been noticeable by me and a lot of others, and it's something that they need to correct. Now, I will say another thing too that the Clippers need to avoid. They definitely need to avoid not moving the ball. They definitely need to avoid isolation basketball, because to me, that's the one thing that hurts the Clippers a lot of times in games. Even when they have Kawhi and PG, a lot of isolation basketball really hurts their game to me. Unless Kawhi or PG is dropping like 40 points in a game or something like that, I feel like that's the only time they're really, really effective with the isolation basketball. When one of or both of them is really actually playing a high level, or maybe if another player's out there dropping 20, 30 points like a Reggie Jackson, somebody like that. But I mean, isolation basketball, I think, really hurts them overall, because when you play good teams, they have isolation moments, but they also have a lot of ball movement moments in the game where their offense doesn't get stagnant and their offense doesn't become predictable. And a lot of times when you look at Clippers games, if you notice, a lot of times their offense is really, really predictable, whether it doesn't matter who they have on the floor, whether Kawhi, PG, any one of their players, because they just look like it's almost like they carried the mentality of, we can play isolation basketball because we got a lot of good individual scorers and a lot of guys who can put the ball in the basket. And that's exactly where they play a lot of games now, which is one reason why this year specifically, even with or without Paul George, or with Kawhi Leonard or without him, they've been up and down, Jekyll and Hyde team. they've been a roller coaster team because that isolation basketball hurts them a lot. It doesn't really help them. And I don't really see why Ty Lue keeps allowing that to happen. If Ty Lue's going to take a page out of somebody's book in the NBA, it needs to be Steve Kerr's for the Golden State Warriors, because with the role players that he had, I mean, when Klay Thompson wasn't there, and some games when Draymond wasn't there and Steph was by himself, they still found a lot of ways to win a lot of games because their ball movement was so sharp, and the offense really wasn't stagnant. Even though Steph would get his shots, he'll get his 5 or 10 threes a game and get his shots up, but everybody else was eating too. Jordan Poole was getting his shots, then you have Toscano Anderson. Then you have Damian Lee, and then you have other players out there, Gary Payton II, getting his shots. It's like everybody is distributing the wealth, and everybody feels a part of the operation. And that's exactly what Ty Lue needs to implement to the Clippers, especially now more than ever, because you don't have two dominant isolation players in Kawhi and PG. You don't have them there. You don't have that luxury. And even when you have the luxury with them, it still needs to be more ball movement somewhat instead of the ball sticking to one guy. Now, if the ball is going to stick to one guy, it does need to be Kawhi Leonard, because he's proven that he can put the ball in the basket and get a team to a championship and put them on his back. He's proven that he can do that. So he's the only guy I think the ball needs to stick to when there is isolation play and when you need a player to just take over a game and shut it down. Kawhi is that type of guy. So I will give you that. But Kawhi is not there. That ball movement needs to be sharp. It needs to be crisp. Everybody needs to be touching it. Everybody needs to understand their role. Everybody needs to understand to find the best shot, the best shot selection possible. Find the high percentage shot. Don't just take threes because you're a good 3-point shooting team and you have all this individual talent. That's not going to win you games. That's the reason why you're winning games you're not supposed to against teams like Philadelphia and the Nets, and you're losing against teams that you're supposed to beat in teams like the Pelicans and the New York Knicks and teams like that. No, it's almost like the Clippers are playing backwards. Find a way to distribute the ball more, get more ball movement, get more high quality shots, and run the offense the way it's supposed to be ran. You have a lot of individualized players. Well, put them in position to score and get easier buckets rather than just living off of shooting threes and isolation basketball when you don't even have your two superstar players to even play that type of style of basketball. And I understand they're doing it by committee, but you're going to have to be more sharp in doing it that way. Yeah, it's just the way it is. I mean, you're going to have to be better. You can't win games. You can't win a game against a really good team and lose a game against a really or a mediocre to a bad team when you have talent enough to put together at least a few game winning streak just so you can keep your chance alive of making the playoffs. Because right now, the Clippers have an opportunity with some games coming up here on their road trip that they can gain some confidence in and get some big wins. One of them was against the 76ers, but then you lose to a team like the New York Knicks. So now it makes it look like, oh man, is this going to be a 4-5? Are they going to go 4-5 out of their next 9 games? Or they're going to go 3-6, out their next 9 games or 8-9 games. It just makes you wonder. So the Clippers going to have to find a way to avoid those two things happening. They're going to have to find a way to better themselves on both ends of the floor. They're going to have to find a way to not be so predictable on offense at times. And I will say this, They can go on a 3-4 game winning streak. They have enough talent on their team to do that, especially with the schedule they got coming up. Like I said, they got the Charlotte Hornets, they got the Orlando Magic, they got the Pacers. They have teams on their schedule, even though they're on a big road trip right now. They have teams on their schedule that they can beat, but they have to just come out there and play like it. And I don't want to hear about early games, 1 o'clock games. I know last year that was the notion. If they play early games, they don't play that well. Well, the Clippers better get out of that phase quick, because right now you're hovering around the 8th, 9th seed, and you can't afford to lose any games. You have to win all that you can, and you have to be on top of your game as much as possible. And any team that you see that's playing 500 basketball or less, you have got to come out with the victory. And that's just the way it is. You have to win the games you're supposed to win and keep the team afloat. That's the part of the next man up mentality. And if that's the mentality, then they have to live that mentality every game and understand that every game is crucial to their success and their chances of making the playoffs and going further while they're in the playoffs. But hey, that's my take on the situation. Leave any comments in the comment section as always. And hey, Cali out.